All right, welcome yet again to another one of our behavior streams. All right. Sorry for missing last week. I thought I would be getting some questions. I didn't get any questions. I hadn't had anything prepared, and so we skipped it. Today we do have some questions, but I'm gonna wrap up a little bit more. One of the families that we provide services to in the US actually had a question for me, and so I figured like, okay, I'll wrap it all up to talk a little bit about what their question was. All right, let me get set up here. Uh, get rid of that. All righty. All right. Um, so uh now the thing is that there are a lot of things to learn and to understand in ABA, right? And the funny thing is that there are a lot of small things, small distinctions that can make something very effective or make it ineffective, right? And those small but very, very important distinctions in treatment will change the outcome of a lot of different things. Okay. And so we're going to get a little bit into that. Before I hop into that, I'll talk a little bit about the struggle that I've had for a very, very long time. Okay. Um, so the struggle here is this, right? To build and to have someone really kind of understand ABA, um, they have to really understand the nuances of what we're talking about. And that can take years and years and years of practice and understanding and failure, right? You learn from the failures, you learn from the practice, and you get better and better over time as you kind of understand how all of the mechanisms work and why some work and others don't, and under what conditions that they work, right? And so the struggle for me has always been about like, oh, do we make it easier for people? Like, do we codify stuff? Like, do we like create lists of things for people to do, you know? And you might wonder, like, well, why not? Why won't you do that? Okay. Well, I think doing that helps people that are not in the field, like parents. I think it helps parents to have some level of guidance and things like that. But my main resistance has been in the staff development side, okay? Because developing things, like, oh, thinking things through, like even lists of things, like lists of imitations to do, all of that stuff, having a therapist actually undergo that process and learn from like, oh, okay, if I had to come up with 10 imitations, what are the 10 imitations that I would teach and how would I order them in sequence so that they're the easiest to learn to the hardest to learn, you know? And it's through that process that somebody gains a deeper understanding of everything, right? And so the more that things get codified, the less thinking is being done, right? Now, for the longest time, like I know there's a large autism organization that's a worldwide organization, and training's hard, training's expensive, right? And what they do is they'll put a child's skill sets through a computer database. Out will spit out like, okay, this is where the child is, and then a very formulated, okay, consistent programming set is developed for the child. And so therapists don't even have to think, oh, what do I teach this child? What they do is like, oh, this is everything you teach in the exact same order, in the exact same way, regardless of the child that you're teaching. Okay. And that organization has some really bad supervisors. Why? Because they don't actually know how to program. They don't actually, because the computers always just, oh, this is just what you do. This is the recipe. Just follow the recipe, you know? And that might work for a subset of kids, but it doesn't work to maximize the gains that any one particular child makes. Okay. And so that's the struggle is that the more we codify things, the more that, like I've had the book come out, and both Ellie and Un Chang and all the great folks at ABA Bears, Eugen there, translating and doing all the hard work and kind of like putting my verbal thoughts into written form so that people can access it and be able to help their own kids. And the struggle still is that I don't want people out there to read the things that I've written and have it be like a rule that must be followed irrespective of any condition or any kind of situation. All right. Remember, I try to put it in the book. I try to put it in a lot of different forms. Everything that I talk about is a guidance, a general set of principles to go by, but they're not meant to be hard and fast rules. Okay? And this is the problem, is like once you put something on paper, okay, it says like, oh, this is what this is for. Then people feel like, okay, this is the box that gets put in there, and this is all that it is. When, oh no, I made this little box as a conceptual box for you to better understand something, but it's not meant to be a prison. It's not meant to hold things in. And that's where I don't like the codification of a lot of different things, even though it would facilitate a lot of improvements in certain areas. To me, it actually is harmful to the field itself, harmful to the developing practitioner because it actually handicaps them and makes them not think, not be critical thinkers, not be people that understand a set of principles, and you're utilizing all of these things that you understand for this particular child at this moment in time, using these particular things that are meaningful for the child to help make the most meaningful, effective changes for that child. Okay, that's what I'm scared of. All right. So now that being said, there are a lot of non-professionals here, right? Okay. So the struggle is kind of like hard, things like that. But the one thing I really want everyone to understand, ABA itself, our approach to ABA is all about flexibility and adaptability. Okay. It is never meant to be a codified and unchanging method to address all situations. It's never, ever, ever meant for that. Okay. What it is that, oh, every child is different, every situation is different. And what you want to be able to do is understand the child, understand the situation, and you craft the best interventions and the best programming for each individual child so that you can maximize that child's gains. Okay. All right, get off my high horse now. I can kind of go on with kind of like the nuances, right? All right, so now one of the questions I had was about the immediacy of the consequences. And I went over a lot of the immediacy of the consequences, right? Like, oh, whether it's a reinforcement or punishment, that the sooner in time, that as soon as the behavior happens, the consequence happens, the better it is. Okay. Why is that? Right. Well, the thing is, we're building connections, right? And, all of us are causal making machines. Like, so, oh, when something happens to us, we're trying to find that connection about why did it happen? Like, what was the cause of this effect, right? And so the closer in time that there's the connection is easier to make. Oh, this happened and then this happened. Oh, okay. I get it. I understand. There's a very, very strong connection between the behavior and the consequence that resulted. Okay. The problem is the further and further and further away you go, the more tenuous that connection, the weaker the connection is. Okay. So as it gets weaker and weaker, there's more noise. There's more different events that are all happening where it makes it more and more difficult for that child to draw that line between this and this. Okay. So the question would be like, can you implement delayed consequences? Yeah, you can. Absolutely. Okay. But you have to understand that how effective it is going to be really determined by does the child and can the child make that connection between the behavior and the consequence that is being implemented. That is the key driver of whether it'll work or not. If the child cannot make that connection, they do not understand why they're receiving that consequence. Okay. That connection will never be made and that intervention will not be effective. Okay. So the delayed consequences can be effective, but it largely depends on whether that connection is actually made or not by the child. Okay. Okay. Now, rewards can be reinforcers. Okay. Now, remember in ABA, a reinforcer is not defined by what happens. Like, oh, I'm given something, I'm not given something, I have to do this or I don't have to do that. It's not defined by that. It's defined by the effects it has on the behavior. So if a reward is used and that reward results in the behavior increasing or improving, then that reward is a reinforcer. Okay? Now, the thing is that rewards generally are extrinsic motivators. Okay, they're outside of the individual. Okay. So these are foods, these are awards, these are activities, but they exist outside of the individual, right? Which means that the reason I am doing whatever it is that I'm doing is to get that reward. Okay. Now keep that in mind as we kind of go forward here. Okay. Reinforcers can be bribes, and this is where you have to really be careful. Okay. When the child engages in a problematic behavior and then you introduce a reward, you introduce a reinforcer at that time to try to get them to do what you ask them to do, that reinforcer, that reward is a bribe. Okay. So, as an example, you tell the child, go clean your room, right? They whine and they cry and like, hey, 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 don't whine, don't cry. You know what? If you clean your room nicely, I'll get you some ice cream. Okay. So they clean their room nicely and you give them ice cream, right? The ice cream is a bribe. It's a reinforcer, but guess what? It's reinforcing. Okay. It's reinforcing the problem behavior. Okay. Because when I do something wrong, you're going to give me something that I really like in order for me to do the right thing. And that's what they learn. Oh, to get things that I really want, I have to misbehave. Only when I misbehave will you bring in something that might be enticing to me. Okay? So that is what a bribe is. It's a reinforcer that is implemented, used after the problematic behavior has already surfaced, and it's to try to kind of like cajole the child into doing the right thing for this external motivator. Okay. It reinforces the problem behaviors. Don't use bribing. All right. Now, the other thing is knowing a specific contingency that is there, meaning like, oh, if you do this, then you get this, right? Can have very, very detrimental effects on internal motivation. Okay. So we talked about extrinsic. We are going to talk a little about intrinsic. Okay. Intrinsic motivation is you yourself, the child themselves, is motivated to do something, not because of a tangible gain or something else. It's that they themselves care about something, and that caring carries them into being motivated to perform a particular behavior. All right. So let's say that you call the child over, right? And then you're like, hey, do you want to work for gummies or do you want a candy? And they're like, oh, I want a candy or I want a gummy. And like, oh, okay. Now they know what they're going to get. Okay. Oh, I'm going to get that gummy. All right. I'm motivated because I want that gummy. All right. Where's the motivation coming from? The motivation is coming from an extrinsic reinforcer. It's not coming from the child themselves, right? And our approach is about developing internal motivation. Okay. It's about fostering more and more internal motivation so that when you ask a child to do something, they don't know what they're going to get. They're going to be surprised by some type of reinforcement that you're going to provide them, right? And because of that, they're not doing it for an extrinsic reward. Okay, it's some known like gummy candy activity like the Nintendo Switch. They are doing it because they want to make you happy. Okay, and as a byproduct of making you happy, they might get reinforced. Okay, and there lies what we're trying to do, which is foster a whole lot of intrinsic motivation that the child has to perform all of these skills that you're teaching them on their own. So another example is like, oh, you know what? If you clean up nicely, you'll get ice cream, right? In this example, this is not bribery because bribery would only you would only say this statement after the child has already done something wrong. Okay. Here you're starting off the task. But again, the problem is that you might get the child to listen really, really well. But where's the motivation coming from? The motivation is coming from the ice cream, the motivator, the external motivator that you've given them. It is not coming from, I should listen to you. Okay. And as a byproduct of listening to you, maybe there's some sort of reinforcement for me. Okay. Big difference. A small difference, massive, meaningful effect on treatment. Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about token systems, right? And uh, you've heard me a lot on our streams talking about, well, my hatred for token systems, right? Okay. All right. So now the thing is, I don't actually hate token systems, but for me, the reason I rail against it is that everybody uses a token system and they use it mindlessly. Okay. And so that everyone can is on the same page. What is this token system that I'm talking about? Okay. Well, a token system basically is the child selects some sort of desired item that they want to work for. It could be a food, it could be an activity. Most of the time at the beginning of treatment, you're looking at foods that the child really likes. So, a bag of gummies, something like that. And then they have to earn tokens. So the easiest token system, like, oh, you have to earn 5 or 10 tokens, and then you'll get the item that you selected, right? And so you earn tokens based on particular behaviors that you demonstrate, listening well, not engaging in a particular behavior, engaging in a particular pro-social behavior, whatever it is, the child earns tokens that will get them when they meet a certain number of tokens to their selected prize. Okay? And the motivation is all external. It's all based on what they chose. And the effect, how much motivation they get is really dependent on how powerful the item it is that they chose. Okay? And then some token systems implement what they call a response cost. Okay. And response cost is, oh, when you've already earned tokens, then I can take those same tokens away from you when you engage in a problematic behavior that we specified. Okay. That's called a response cost in the token system. Okay. All right. Now, like I said, it is widely used. I call it the poor man's ABA. And I call it the poor man's ABA because you don't have to know really a lick about behavior principles in order for this technique to actually work. Okay. It does result in quick effect. The child's much more quick and likely to listen to you because the child really wants that reward. They really want that extrinsic reinforcement. Okay. And so, because it's very, very clear they want that, then it leads them to comply much more easily to tasks and things like that. Okay. So that's why I understand why people use it. Okay. It's effective, it's quick, okay? But the problem is that it can have long-term consequences, okay? And the consequences of this are that the child will build no internal motivation when a token system is used systematically, consistently, and for a long period of time without any fade out plan. Okay. And to me, I don't bother even using this because reinforcement sampling is much more powerful over the long term because you're building in social reinforcement, physical, interactional reinforcement for the child. So you're helping them overcome the autism diagnosis through this other method. Okay. That's why for me, I don't even bother using because it ends up being a crutch, a handicap. So that's the danger. I once, when I was a therapist, I went to one of the kids' homes, and then, I was like, oh, okay, I think it's time to do homework. And the dad's like, yeah, fine, I'll do homework. What do I get? Right? This child had a token system his entire life. Okay. And every single week, he was working to earn like $125 fishing pole or something, and this was a wealthy family, they could afford it. However, he needed some external motivation to do his homework. Okay, something that he needs to learn to do without that external motivator. All right. That's why I rail against it. Okay, I rail against it because it's overused and most people don't know how to implement it, and it has these largely detrimental effects on internal motivation, which harm the kids over the long term. Now, let me talk about some of the token systems that we use at ABA Bears. And honestly, I didn't think too hard, about it. Um, but the easiest one I can really think about is a one token one, right? And the token one is like, oh, for kids that have zero motivation to play games, like they're not interested in winning, zero motivation to do it, we'll use a food reinforcer at the onset. Oh, the winner gets the gummy. Okay. And that's to light the fire. They have no motivation to do it. That external motivator is to try and light the fire so that they have something that they get from the winning. Okay. Now, if the child hates losing, like, oh, every time I lose, I'm going to kick the board, I'm going to throw all the pieces around and scream my bloody head off. Well, for those kids, we'll use that external motivator for good sportsmanship. Okay. So, even though you lost the game, you can still get this gummy if you control yourself and don't engage in these problematic, unsportsmanlike behaviors. Okay. All right. Now, the thing is, we use it, but generally speaking, it's a temporary method to kind of like jumpstart a fire, like it's like Flint. We're trying to like we're trying to get the child to be motivated internally to get that. Now, we don't just rely on, oh, here's the reward. Okay, and let's hope that the reward builds some sort of internal motivation. No, what we're doing is we're using that reward, we're adding praise, social interactions, throwing them up in the air, patting on the back, doing all of these other things, these social interactions with the child to expand so that, oh, I can get not just this reward, I can get all of this social praise, all of these things. And what we're hoping for is that it all that enjoyment that they get from the gummy is spread into these other areas, more social areas. Okay. Now we'll also use the response cost. Okay. And again, response cost is the loss of a token in a token economy. Okay. Now, we also call this negative punishment. Okay. And the definition of a negative punishment is that you remove something that the child likes that results in the child stopping whatever behavior that they're engaging in. Okay. That's negative punishment or response cost. Okay. Now, the thing is, all of these are kind of guiding principles on how you might understand our lives, right? They're just names to these forces at work all around us all the time, every day. So when you think about your child and what they have access to on an everyday basis, my son gets access to his tablet maybe like 15 minutes every day. There's a chance for him to get some more. But generally speaking, he just kind of gets it. Like some kids get TV, some kids get like, oh, there's free access to a whole lot of snacks. Some kids have free access to tablets and TVs and cell phones and whatnot. Okay. So for us, you can conceptualize any of that stuff that they get on a regular basis as a privilege that can be taken away from them. Okay. You can utilize those things to get rid of some problematic behaviors. Okay. So one of our clients here, kid loves food. I can't wait till he grows up. Me and him, we're gonna go out eating. We're gonna enjoy ourselves. Buffets, be careful. All right. So he loves food. All right. And um, at school, He had some problematic behaviors that we're trying to get rid of. Okay, so what we ask the parents to do is, hey, all the time, make sure you pack a highly desired snack for him because at school they have a snack time and then they have lunch time, right? So we ask parents to really pack it like a really desired snack for him and a really highly preferred dessert for lunchtime, so he has his regular meal at lunch, and there's a little special something that when he's done with his meal, he can have access to. Okay. So the thing is, when the child's just kind of like having a regular day without engaging in any kind of problem, he just automatically, you just get it. You get the snack, you get the dessert, it's kind of like it's a privilege that you have. However, you misbehave and you lost it. Okay. So we have the two. So snack comes before lunch, right? So we have some time before snack, and then after snack, there's some time before lunch. So if he misbehaves in that first section for a specific type of behavior, he loses that snack, right? And then this next period, he'll lose that dessert. All right. That way, what happens is that you don't lose ammunition, right? It's not like, oh, once you lost it, you lost it. Oh, what motivator do I have now? Why do I care anymore? So that's how we designed it, so that, okay, if the child engages in any kind of problematic behaviors early on, they lose their snack. If they engage in between that, they lose the dessert. They don't lose their food. Okay. I'm not saying like, oh, the child's going hungry. They are losing that preferred dessert after they eat the rest of their lunch. Okay. So you might be thinking, like, is the snack or dessert a reinforcer? Not really. Okay, like it's not delivered upon a specific behavior or a set of behaviors, right? The child just kind of earns it, by default, right? They're just gonna get it. Okay, so technically not necessarily a reinforcer. Okay. Now, the thing is, you can argue about it, right? When you're like, "Yeah, maybe it's a," and honestly, who cares? It's not that big of a deal, okay? You can conceptualize that, oh, you earn this reinforcer through engaging in an appropriate set of behaviors, right? Okay, and you just automatically earn it by engaging in those regular behaviors that you do. Okay, so you can argue, yes, it is reinforcement, and maybe you'd be right. Okay, but again, what's controlling these behaviors? It's not that. Okay, what's controlling the behaviors is the response cost portion of it, the negative punishment side. Okay, now the next question is like, well, is the snack or dessert a bribe that we're providing the child? No, no, it's not following a problematic behavior, right? It's not like la la la, I know this thing, la, 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 la. Hey, how about this? Oh, okay, now I'll listen. Okay, it's not following a problematic behavior. What they do is they just automatically, it's a part of their snack bag, it's part of their lunch, it's in there, they're automatically going to get it. We're not introducing it upon the occurrence of a problematic behavior. Okay. So it is not a bribe, definitively so. Okay. Now, is the snack or dessert a punisher? No. Okay. This is the nuance, right? Okay. That you can argue is a reinforcer for when they engage in a set of appropriate behaviors, right? You can conceptualize it that way. Okay. It's the actual loss of those items that serves as the punisher. Okay. Small little difference, but your understanding of that is going to be critical to really understanding reinforcement and punishment. Okay. Um, and technically speaking, it's only a punisher if what we do actually results in a decrease in those problematic behaviors. And I'm happy to report, yes, it is having that effect. All right. So is the loss of it? Yes, absolutely. The loss of those desired items serves as a punisher when it decreases the problematic behavior. Okay. Remember, it's called a negative punisher response cost, and this preferred item or activity is lost, okay, when they engage in a problematic behavior. All right, so hopefully that kind of wraps up all the things that I've been talking about nicely into this little package that everyone kind of hopefully really benefited from. Okay. All right, now to our questions and our answers for this week. All right, this mom or dad is receiving consultation services from our great Amy Cho at Kangaroo. Child is 9 years old in second grade and is attending the special ed class in a regular elementary school. Recently, the school has been saying that my son is too noisy. The issue seems to be caused by things like talking to himself, humming, and whining. There was no problem in first grade because the whole class was loud, so you couldn't even hear the child. Now that the class is really quiet, the child really stands out. So they want to try a be quiet sitting, but they're not sure how to implement it. So their first question is the be quiet sitting the same as the wait sitting? No, it's not. Okay. Because they have two different purposes. Okay. The waiting program is to teach the child to delay their gratification. Okay, like I want something and I want it right now. And they're learning to tolerate the delay in accessing that thing that they want. Okay, that's the waiting program. Now, this is where a nuance kind of plays in. Is it run very, very similar to the waiting program? Yes. Yes, it is. Okay. The structure of it looks identical. Okay. But the purpose of it is very, very different. In a waiting program, I will allow vocalizations as long as it's not loud. Okay. In a be quiet program, I do not allow any vocalizations and they are not waiting on something. Okay. They are not waiting for a reinforcer or something that they highly desire. Okay. What's happening is they are learning to control it so that they don't vocalize for a certain span of time and they get reinforced for not vocalizing in that span of time. So in a waiting program, if the child touches the item or does something highly inappropriate, we'll tell them no and then we'll reset the sitting. In a be quiet program, if the child makes any vocalizations at all, you give them a no and you restart that sitting. Okay. So then the next question is that how many minutes should they start with and how long should the child be expected to stay quiet? So for myself, I always start with lower threshold, right? Lower, lower, lower. For me, I might not even start at minutes because I don't know your child. I don't know how frequently they engage in this stereotype, the self-stimulatory behaviors, right? And because I don't know, I can't give you a great guidance. What you want is you want a lot of success at the beginning of the sitting. Okay. So what that means is that if you set it at a minute, the child fails and fails and fails, the problem is going to be they won't ever learn what you're trying to teach. So for me, it's oftentimes better to start at a lower, lower, lower time frame, like 10 seconds, 5 seconds even, and make it absolutely clear the criteria for them being successful, which is absolutely no sound on their part. Okay. And for me, when the child's able to do that, what I'll start to do is I'll start to slowly increase the amount of time that I expect them to be quiet. And it's only after they get reinforcement will they allow to engage in those the self stims, the vocal self stims again. Okay. Now, I don't tend to increase it a lot early on because I want all the different conditions to be established. What I mean is like, oh, can you sit at the desk when I tell you to be quiet and be quiet? Can you sit on the floor and be quiet when I tell you? When you're playing with a puzzle, when you're doing this worksheet, when you're doing this, when I tell you quiet, can you listen to me at this lower time frame? And when I see that across a lot of these conditions, you can, then I start to increase the time that I'm making you be quiet for that period of time. Now, another strategy that we've started to employ for some kids is that we'll have them wear something. Like it could be a watch, it could be a bracelet, it could be a necklace. But what we teach them is, oh, when you wear this thing is the cue for you not to be vocalizing. All right. So we've started to do that. It's had some positive effects, and that's something long term that you want to try, but don't try it at the onset. Do it after they've learned really to understand your instructions, and then you start to pair that bracelet, that watch, the ring, whatever it is that, oh, anytime that this is on, you don't engage in that. Now, the thing is, when you start that process, you're not expecting them like, I'm just going to put it on and all day. You're not, no, 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 they can't control themselves. You are guaranteeing failure, right? So, what you want to make sure you're doing is selecting specific times. And especially as you kind of grow this amount of time, for me, it's fine to grow it to like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, even. And then you start to like have half an hour periods of time during the day where you put on the jewelry or the item, and then you allow them to kind of to not engage in the vocal stereopathy. I can't say that word for a reason, but you don't allow them to vocalize when they're wearing that item. Okay. And then as they get better and better, you can slowly have smaller and smaller breaks between and less time in between. And so that, oh, for most of their day, you're having them have this on, but I still take it off. Like when they come home from school, that's the first thing that they take off. If they need to, blah, 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 you let them do that because they've contained themselves, they control themselves for a certain amount of time. You have to let it out at some point, right? So we allow for that release. Okay. All right. Hopefully that helps you out. All right. Our next question has to do with nonverbal imitation. Okay. Now the child didn't really understand imitation. So they really started with object imitation. And they practice things like putting a toy in a bowl or stacking two cups, since the child did well with those. And now they're actually able to move over to gross motor imitation. The problem is, as soon as they start the instruction and demonstrate the action, the child will immediately begin before the parent finishes the instruction or the full action. Now, the parent understands that the child must wait until after the parents finish the instruction and the full demonstration before they should start imitating. So they want to know, like, is it okay if the child's imitating it at the same time I'm demonstrating it? And I would tell you no. Okay, like you're teaching them to wait for the entire thing in order to copy it correctly, because sometimes they are missing some things if they're already engaged in it before you've completed something. Okay. Now, so what I would suggest for you to do is teach one-handed imitations first. Okay. So what that means is like, okay, do this, do this, but you're using a single hand. For me, I'm using my left hand because most of the kids I work with, they're right-handed. And so you were working on that mirroring, right? And so what I would do is I put this other hand, my right hand, I would hold both of the kids' hands down while I had them go, do this, and then after I'm done, I release and have them complete it. Okay. Now, this putting your hands on there, that's a prompt. Okay. That's to help delay the start of the response. And what your goal is to slowly but surely get rid of that prompt so they don't need it and they understand to wait until you're done before they get started on that response. Try that method. Let me know how it works. If it doesn't, we'll try to figure something else out. All right. Um, Actually, this was the next part of the question, which is how do they handle this? They can't do motions with both hands. Start with the single hand ones. Once your child understands that they have to wait for you to complete the response before they can copy, they'll get better and better with it. So you'll introduce the two-handed imitations later and get the single handed ones done until you can fade out that hand and they can still perform and wait for you to be done. That's when you'll introduce all the two-handed ones. All right. Next question is, after learning ABA through Kangaroo, they've been practicing matching with the child. They started with 3D object matching using three stackable items, a plate, a bowl, and a spoon. And although the spoon was a bit tricky at first, the child now matches all three correctly, even if they're placed in different positions. Now they want to move on to 2D to 3D matching, so they printed out photos of the objects. They're not sure how to set it up. All right, now for myself, I still think this is a little bit premature to go into this matching because you want to move into 3D to 3D matching with non-stackable items. So that's teaching the child just to put it touching the other object, but they don't have to stack. And you want to teach a number of those until the child's really quick with items that you never had to practice. You give it to them, and this is an identical. And make sure you're working with identical. Okay, identical. Okay, get them really good at that first. Then when it's time to go non-identical, and you go non-identical before you go 2D to 3D or 3D to 2D or 2D to 2D, you go non-identical. That means like, oh, this water bottle matches up to a different kind of water bottle that has a blue label, but I can, oh, these are the same, even though they look slightly different. You have two different types of spoons. You have different types of cups. So all of those kind of things. And again, move toward non-stacking items, right? So the first step is move to non-stacking items that are identical. Once you can rotate to any item like that, then you move on to the non-identical items, okay? And you go through all of those. Once you get to that step, then you would go into the 3D to 2D matching. All right. Um, so the easier thing for me is to have the pictures on the floor and give the item to the child to match because they're used to holding a 3D item, and putting it with the pair that matches. And so you're just kind of teaching them that in the beginning. But once they learn it, then you can start to interchange it where, oh, it's objects on the table and photos that you give them. All right. So that's kind of how I would approach the teaching of this particular skill. Okay. All right. So if the child holds a photo and tries to match it with the 3D objects on the floor, it's hard to see the object clearly. especially a spoon. Well, you don't need it after the match, right? Like if the child's holding the photo, really they're already looking at the item, and if they match it correctly, it doesn't matter if they're covering up the object on the floor because they've already matched it correctly, right? I'm hoping I understand your question correctly, but I think I do. So that's what I would go. Don't worry about it. I think the only worry is like, oh, they don't look at the field. They don't know what's on the field. They're only paying attention to the picture and they blindly put it. Okay. But again, there's always a ways around it, which is like you have them look at all the items on the floor, then you give them this card higher up, and then they grab that card and now they can put it to the items, right? There's a lot of different ways to do it. Okay. Now I do recommend this other method, which is give them the 3D object and match it with the photo. And I think that's easier because they're used to manipulating the object, not a card yet. Again, it depends on the child how difficult it is to hold the picture of something and match it with that. But I would stay with something that they're comfortable with, that they have kind of like a history with to make the learning easier for them. Okay. All right. And of course, once they get good with 2D to 3D, 3D to 2D, you can go into 2D to 2D matching. All right. Next question is a therapist that teaches ABA at a center. They're currently doing the Come Here program to teach a child to follow instructions at the center. However, because of space constraints, they can't extend the practice with the child coming over from one room to another. So they're planning to ask the parents to work on the skill in real life environments at home. Great job, by the way. Parents are vital for treatment. And in order for the child to benefit, the parents have to learn how to do this stuff too. And it's a great way to extend that therapy over into the home environment. Now, for the therapist themselves, instead of expanding the distance, they were thinking about increasing the number of round trips the child makes to raise the success criterion. Okay. Now, for me, it depends, like on how well they come over. If they're already coming over really well from that distance, then this is a waste of time to do. Okay. What I would do is I look at different formats. Okay. Meaning like, oh, you're engaged with a non-preferred toy on the ground and I call you over. So you have to learn to disengage with that toy. In the beginning, I'll tell you, come here, help you disengage, and have you come over, reinforce, I send you back. And now we work on that until you're able to disengage from that toy and come over. Then what I would do is I'd increase the enjoyment, the toys that they like more and more and more, so that when I can call you over from your most beloved toy and you know to set it down, get up, come over and sit down, that's how I know that we've been really successful. Okay. And so those are the other conditions that I would work on because I think they're more valuable than just increasing the amount of times that they do it. All right. I think that's all the questions from this past week. Do we have any questions from this week's stream? Eugen? 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 All right, Eugen's ignoring me. So I'm assuming that we're all done with any questions for this week. Again, thanks everybody for taking part of their day to come and sit with us and learn with us. Hopefully, everything that I've talked about makes sense. Remember, if there's anything that needs clarification, we're here to help. Send in your questions. We're more than happy to clarify, to expand, and to do all those things. All right. So thanks everybody. Remember, before you leave, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and tell all your friends about us. All right. We'll see everybody next time. Bye-bye.